Welcome to another episode of Vicarious Insights, Learn with me, the podcast where we delve into the diverse world of disability services, bringing you insights from professionals, parents, and individuals with lived experience. I'm Jace, your host, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Stu, who's the owner and lead physiotherapist at UC Physio, with clinics located in Upper Coomera and Pimpama. UC Physio offers a range of services specialising in general musculoskeletal physiotherapy, sports injuries, and chronic pain management. Stu and his team are dedicated to providing personalised and effective treatments to improve clients' physical health and overall well-being. Their approach combines hands-on therapy, exercise, prescription, and education to help patients achieve their recovery goals and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Thank you, Stu. Welcome to
Thanks,
the.
Jake.
We'll get straight into it. Tell us a bit about yourself and what got you into physio.
Well, that's a very good question. The first thing I think I could probably say is when you're in grade 10, or when I was in grade 10 at the time, we had the opportunity to do work experience. And one of the things that my brother had done was go and check out physio as a work experience possibility. And I tried to get into a civil engineering one. Unfortunately, sifting rocks like we were doing to make sure that they were the appropriate size didn't really quite make me entertained. I realize it's a little bit more than that, but that's what the experience taught me. And it was definitely something to not go down that track and start to head into more of the health and fitness and some of the things that I guess I was more interested in. But it was good to kind of knock the civil engineering thing on the head pretty quick.
yeah, get that out of the way. It's like, all right, this is, but that's what work experience is for, isn't it? Give you a bit of an idea of if you like it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So sifting rocks, yep, that's more puzzle pieces to play with, I think, with the physio side, I imagine.
Oh, the physio is a lot more diverse than that, that's for sure. But I learned a lot about road base and how roads are manufactured in terms of the different size rocks for different levels and layers. And as a grade 10 student, it was a bit of an eye-opener as to exactly what goes on, but not an area that I want to work in.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I could see the interest in that. My brain's just going to the Roman roads, and anyway, I'll digress. I'll go off on a tangent there. So now you are also you're in some pretty high level sports yourself as well.
I was until, I guess you could say, end of last year. So I competed in track and field and touch as a junior, and played hockey as well. And then when I got old enough that I was unable to train as much as I want to maintain good times for, say, sprints, and I had a couple of years off and came back into hockey. And after a few years more social, decided that I wanted to try and go a little bit further. And we made a couple of national or state-based teams and played at the Nationals, and did some rep work for the Gold Coast teams in the Masters. But unfortunately, injuries catch up with all of us, and I have one that's meaning I can't play hockey anymore.
Oh, Is that like no hockey at all anymore?
No, not anymore. No, my shoulders currently undergoing a little bit of experimental treatment to try and make it better. So I've got some big cysts in it, and we've been down a bit of a path with it, and we're currently trying some stem cells. Had the first injection after harvesting last week on Thursday.
Okay, that's interesting. That's at the forefront of stuff, isn't it? So you're the crash test on me.
Pretty much, yeah. And there's not too many people who've been injecting shoulders. Mostly it's hips and knees where typically the arthritis gets done when you're talking an arthritic use for it. There's definitely other uses for it, but when I'm talking about my shoulder, it's can my stem cells build some stuff back in there and prolong my career? That's essentially the reason for doing it.
Yeah, okay. Cool. You have to keep me updated with that. That's good. There'll be a lot of science and stuff, and a lot of smart people out there working their angles and understanding. And
the clinic down in Melbourne that I go to, they released a new study. I think last week while I was in the clinic waiting, they were getting ready to be bombarded for the next 3 months with phone calls. And when I try to call them on Monday to just check on something, then yeah, it was try to call the number and it just kept going through. So I sent them an email and got something back pretty quick.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So with that, now I know because I've actually worked in with you guys. So I did my placement as an allied health assistant in there, and that was great. I loved it. So with that, I know that you do also work with people with disabilities.
Yes.
So, what led to you as physios, as a business, to working in with people with disabilities?
Physio and disability has always had a little bit of a role, just depends on the clinic scenario and situation. For example, my wife, who works in our clinic, she does most of the pediatric stuff. She used to work for a different organization. They were primarily in that disability field. And as funding models change, then the models of funding just enabled it to be more accessible to private health clinics, more so than just the NGOs.
Okay, and that's so NGOs is the national government,
non-government organizations.
Non-government.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the not-for-profits were originally the ones who were in most of that space, and charitable organizations, and some of those are having a hard time maintaining viability at the moment. So some of them are no longer offering allied health as much, but there's more scope for people with disability to get out and access physio in whatever component they need it, I guess.
Yep, and I imagine so with that, so with the NGOs, so that would be physios donating their time to.
No, typically, so it would have been when Naomi was working for Montrose Access that she was with them. So in Queensland, it was Montrose Access, and they've now amalgamated with another organisation. I can't quite remember who. Cerebral Palsy League was there originally, and they've now changed. They don't have so many people in the allied health at the moment because it's just not as viable. But there's more of those not-for-profits. In Tassie, for example, would be St Giles, and I can't remember the organisation in South Australia, but there's different organisations that would have picked up the state government funding in various different forms. That would have been bulk funding as opposed to pay for service.
Okay. And when you're looking at further education, upskilling, keeping yourself abreast of new information, new ways of doing things, new ways of helping, all of that, that doesn't just cost time, that costs money. So I imagine the difference between a business and not-for-profit is there should be a little bit more spending money for things like that to upskill staff. And
you'd hope that there would be. It hasn't always turned out that way, but generally in the private practice, you have therapists who have particular interests and they want to upskill in particular areas, and that makes our life easier as business owners, where we need to get our staff skilled in particular areas to service the need of the community that they want to be treating in.
Yep. And you've got a bit of variation with your staff.
Yeah, we're kind of lucky in the fact that the way that we've set things up, because myself coming from a musculoskeletal private practice clinic background, and Naomi coming from that more NGO background in pediatrics, we really looked to set up the business where we could go, okay, rather than just trying to get all our therapists to model off us, then we want each of our therapists to have a special interest or to be able to drive their own likes and interests. So it's much more pleasing, I guess, turning up to work, and if you can drive your own interests, then working is going to be much more fun and interesting, and it's going to be more enjoyable when your career will hopefully last longer.
Yeah, that's I'm only a few episodes deep into this, but I'm already finding some crossovers. So I spoke with James a couple of episodes ago, and he helps businesses to see their strong and their weak points and stuff like that. But one of his big things was diversity of thought, which is clear exactly what you've got there. Having that, it's like, okay, but I can see from this angle, and it's like, hang on, you're thinking about this a little bit different than me, and that's a good point that I'd never thought of, and which can allow for other things, because it takes more than one head, right?
Yeah. And it's I can't be the best at everything, so there's no way for me to no need for me to be trying to be the best at everything. You got to work out what it is that you have the better skills in, and if you enjoy doing that, then target that and work in that area. If for example we've got other staff members who are more interested in certain things, then supporting them to work in those areas is going to be more beneficial, because they're going to love doing it, and hopefully they'll be good at it. And self-promotion makes life a lot easier, rather than relying on us to have to continually drive the business to get things or cash flow in that sense, I guess you could say.
Okay. And the because it's not just a job, it's you're getting, these are the bits that I really like. I'm going to be self-driven. The passion is going to push that little bit more, like, hey, I'm enthusiastic about this for real, not just for a paycheck, which is an excitement, is an exciting way to come to work, to know that that it is going to be new. And
I mean, it's not always the easiest thing to do, because sometimes when you have therapists who've gone through uni and they've been very much trained, I guess, to think of things in more of a hospital kind of setting, where there's always a patient, there's always the next one, you come in, come out, and fix them off, and off they go. And sometimes when people have been trained in that fashion, they don't necessarily have the skills to self-promote and let other people know where their interests lie. And that has been a little bit of an issue, that it's been hard for us to, in some respects, to drive people's creativity and pushing themselves out of their comforts in terms of talking to other people. That has been a bit of a hard thing, but our current team are pretty happy and pretty good at doing it.
They definitely seemed pretty happy while I was there.
Oh yeah.
It was, so you got a pretty good dynamic there. You've got a bit of versatility, and there's actually interesting being inside the physio. So from I'm PT background and coming into doing that, seeing the different things, like there was actually a lot of things in there. Coming in, I'm like, physio is this. I had this basic idea of, like, that's what physio. You break something, you pop something, you put something in the wrong place, you go in and physio helps you to get it back there. Which I guess that's the really dumbed down explanation. But you actually, there's a lot more that you can do with that.
It's such a wide area that you can choose to focus on what might seem to be a small niche, and if you happen to get that as what people know you for, then you get lots of people being referred for those particular things. There's just so much that you can work on, and so many problems that people can have, that there's a myriad of different things that you might want to work on, ranging from vestibular balance disorders, general musculoskeletal things like sore necks, backs and shoulders, ankles, all the typical things that people would associate usually with a clinic, ongoing or chronic pain scenarios, developmental delay from children, or Erb's palsy, or other kind of things that people happen to be born with. There's just so many different things, and that's just touching the musculoskeletal side of it, without even thinking about any respiratory or other neurological things, whether it be Parkinson's, and sometimes just even as people get older, they just need a little bit of extra strength and conditioning. And I think a bit of extra strength and conditioning, when you combine a couple of these things that might be going on, then a lot of the time, getting a base strength and conditioning, and then being able to work on whatever other needs or goals that they have is what we need to do. That was something I learned in there. Was it like, I learned a lot, but noting like the vestibular stuff, the dizziness and things like that. I would have never thought about going to a physio for that. It's like
take a pill. I don't know. I'm not sure what I would have thought would fix that. Just like live with it, I guess. But there's actually a very specific way to work through that to help that. So someone that does have chronic dizziness and that go to a physio.
Well, Jessica, so one of our staff, Jessica's one of her passions is to kind of work in that vestibular environment. That's a little bit of a specialized area where you go and do extra training in it. And all of us will have a basic understanding and be able to do some of the more basic things that everyone should be able to do if they're a qualified physio. But once you've gone and spent a few extra days or weeks doing extra courses, then it should be, and it is, just a little bit more interesting to nitpick the tiny little bits that make a little bit of a difference in terms of why to choose a particular exercise rather than another, or why to progress or not to progress in certain scenarios and environments.
Cool. And there was yes, and I was amazed by that, and I was amazed to see people leave and go, "Holy crap! Like that worked." And I watched it go, "Really? That worked? Wow!" And then another thing was the Parkinson's as well.
Yes.
Like not something it would have been on my radar that we would go to physio. And so there's Parkinson's and things like dementia, and that can be something that it's not going to fix it. But what would a physio be doing for something in those situations?
So more Parkinson's, there's different or changes, I guess, that have happened since I was at uni and to what's actually being done now. So the goal of most Parkinson stuff, so we'll separate that from dementia because it's kind of two different things. But so the Parkinson's, we're looking more at to improve the strength of the nerve signal to the muscle. And all that originates up in the brain. So if you can make movements large, strong amplitude, you're going to end up getting a stronger signal and help to overcome some of the problems that can happen with Parkinson's. That's a very broad summary and grossly oversimplified, but essentially what we want to do is get some of these movements happening, a stronger, faster amplitude so that we can get better, stronger nerve connections. And then some of the deficits in neurotransmitter aren't as much an issue.
Okay, so it'd almost be like forcefully getting an air gun down a dusty hose or something to not.
Except you've got to you just got to train the system to do that. So with any movement pathway, it's basically a memory that you're trying to trigger. So any skill acquisition, any movement that you've learned, whether it be writing, handwriting, we're trying to strengthen those movement patterns that happen that you would have learned about when you're looking at your motor planning, your schema, and all that kind of stuff. So if we can strengthen those pathways, you don't need as much to trigger them. So it's like any memory or anything. If you can strengthen the pathway, that's a lot easier. The neuromatrix, if you want to get a little bit more complicated, but it's basically it. Just a whole bunch of connections of neurons.
So is that so with Parkinson's? I think Michael J. Fox. I think I grew up, and he's Parkinson's, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think like the shaking and like I've watched him on movies, like actually playing a part with Parkinson's. So is that shaking because the information going there isn't as strong? It's like little bit, not a lot, little bit, not a lot.
Not quite. So that's more, I think, driven by some of the things that happen in some of where the nerves all bunch up into some of the control centers. So that can be more of a thing that happens in those. But to overcome those, if we can strengthen the pathways going down, it can just override some of those aberrant things that get sent down or sometimes don't get sent down.
Okay. I usually say this when I'm talking to. I think I've said this in every episode so far. If I'm looking off and I'm dazing off, I'm filing. it's filing. It's going there. And
think of the nucleus where, you know, all the nerves kind of bunch up for various different things. There's different nucleus for different things, and particular for Parkinson's, there's different spots where. So some of the neurotransmitter that's involved in that is just not in the same quantities that it should be, and so that's where more of the, I guess, the shaking comes from. I think I'd have to touch up and read up on that. It's probably been about 7 years since I last looked at it, but it'd be probably more looking at the nucleus or some of the nuclei.
Okay. So, and there's also some things that you can do with people with dementia.
Not so much dementia itself. I think dementia is really just trying to, you know, make people not decline.
Okay. So it's keeping it that rather than getting down to here. If we can keep them a few more years along that way, then that's potentially.
I haven't worked with too many people with, you know, dementia specifically as their prime diagnosis for quite a while, but in nursing homes, physios will often, you know, work with people with dementia, mostly to make sure that they are maintaining, you know, strength conditioning and, you know, reducing risks of falls.
So falls prevention.
Falls prevention. Various different things that, you know, physios may do to enrich the environment. So sometimes you might see, you know, pretend bus stops being put in various different spots because people always used to visit a bus stop, and, you know, they would go there, wait for the bus, and then, you know, as sad as it might seem, they'll just start to complain that the bus is late again, and, you know, someone will distract them, and then off they'll go and find something slightly different. That's in the kind of the worst case scenarios. There's a little bit, I guess, different things you can do when they're not so bad, but it's really just looking at maintaining strength conditioning and enabling people to stay out of care for as long as possible.
Yes. I'm working with a client that's approaching those things, so I'm picking anyone's brain that's got more info for me there. In your Pimpama clinic, you do a lot more with peds.
Yeah, so we originally started off with the Upper Coomera clinic, and we deliberately planned that as more of an open plan to make use of the light and the windows. And the thing that we found was a bit of a problem was, you know, it was so inviting. We'd have lots of kids going to go through into the nice gym area, and from a safety perspective, particularly as a business owner who, you know, if there's anything wrong, everyone has to do paperwork in terms of making sure it doesn't happen again. Then that in particular environment was not ideal for having the volume of kids that we were having through. So when we ran out of space, we were looking at trying to make it a little bit more safe and make it so that we could have kids slightly more down one end and separated from the heavier stuff that adults might be doing down the other end.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely separated out. And so we've got, you know, a few different therapists that are, you know, primarily, you know, we call them the PEDS team, and they work on primarily, you know, things that are usually funded under NDIS. It doesn't have to be under NDIS, but usually that's where the bulk of our, you know, PEDS funding comes from.
What would be some of your most say usual conditions or things that you do work with in that department?
In the pediatric area, it ranges from Erb's palsy, cerebral palsy. I think there's some who've got Fragile X. There's a unique few people that have very rare diseases or conditions or genetic. There's one of those again. Some of those genetic or rare genetic disorders. And sometimes you just don't know what that actually is until you have to go and read up on it, work out exactly how the person's going to present. And usually the team will do that if they get enough information beforehand. They'll be able to have a bit of an idea of what assessments they're going to need to make. I think one of Naomi's specialized interest is spinal muscular atrophy. So she's someone who's spent a little bit more time than the average person treating and reading up on those, along with muscular dystrophies. There's a few different types of muscular dystrophies, and that requires a unique set of skills. Often, there's certain things that you have to be aware of as a therapist that are going to happen to that particular style of client, and you have to be mentally prepared when things don't go as you would like.
And I would imagine you would spend a fair amount of time with those clients too. So you get to know them, you care.
Definitely, yeah. I don't in my role so much, because my role is a little bit more musculoskeletal.
Fix them, get back on the field.
And all that kind of more traditional private practice stuff. But we definitely have clients who have passed away, and I think there's definitely some, or at least one I know, that we've got a photo that the mother sent out to various different people that's still hanging up in the garage on the fridge. So yeah, there's definitely things that you have to be aware of that are going to affect you from a mental standpoint, because once you've seen how someone, when you first meet them and they might be, say, 5, and then you follow them through until they get to, say, 12, 15, and it's looking a little bit harder for them at that point. And if you've seen that once and you see it in a lovely 5-year-old, then it's very hard, I guess, to know what's likely going to happen and how you're going to have to deal with it, and then more importantly, how the family is going to cope with it. Because you have to have that compassion and that care, knowing where they are as a 5-year-old, but also knowing where they're going to need help as a 12-year-old, for example.
Yeah. So knowing that that's where the train's heading, but you're going to make the carriage as comfortable as possible along the way, and as strong as possible.
It's not always going to be palliative, but there's definitely times where you need to be aware that when certain signs start to happen, you need to get them into a wheelchair, and knowing things like how long it takes for wheelchairs to get approved under various different funding streams is quite an important aspect to the job. Because if you know that they're going to need something in 1 year's time, and you know that it takes around about 9 months to get the paperwork, the trials, and then the approvals done, at different times will be different for different clients and different plan managers and NDIS delegates, but it can take a while to get some of these things done. And if you're not aware of the signs that are creeping up, then you can have someone who's unable to move. If they're unable to move in the community, then all of a sudden things will deteriorate much quicker because they just can't get out and about. So it's about, I guess, knowing where things are going to go and preemptively getting stuff ready for the next stage, if it happens to be that way.
And that's where the benefit of the report writing from somebody that has been through it, understands the system, but also understands the individual, what they're going through and those timeframes. So having that report written before the next funding rollover or review or whatever can have that funding ready in place to go, okay, cool, we've got it. Look, you need it in the next 6 weeks. Cool, we've got that funding sitting there to get it. And it's
very important to get those reports done. And I don't know anyone who actually likes writing them, because they take a lot of time, and they need to be written in a specific manner so that someone can, from a non-health practitioner perspective, look at it and understand where we're coming from. So it does take a little bit of deciphering and trying to write something in a easy to read manner so that things will be followed through. It's just sometimes those reports and the testing and the outcome measures that we have to use, they just take a lot of time to write and complete, and it's just not something that we like to do usually as therapists. We like usually hands-on and actually seeing that we're making a difference. But I think knowing that what you do from a paperwork perspective now then helps someone sometimes 12 months down the track. I think that's the important bit. And once you've seen how it works and you've got on the front foot proactively, then you can kind of go, okay, well, that's where we need to focus a little bit more time and energy, because if we don't do that now, then we're going to have a problem later.
Yeah. And preempting that. Yeah. Preventative is always better than curative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's yeah. Okay, cool. Now that was actually sort of leading into probably one of the next questions I was going to ask, which what are benefits and problems that physio can solve for people on the NDIS?
Well, on the NDIS, it really depends on, I guess, what the goals are. So one of the things that we have to be mindful of is, because we've got such a large scope of things that we can potentially do, we have to make sure that we're addressing things according to the goals that people have. And if we are just finding random things that we can fix with anyone, well, I can go to any shopping center and find things to fix. It's more about, from the NDIS perspective, what it is that the goals are that they've approved for funding. And if they've approved particular things, then that's what we need to work on. If there's certain medical things that would fit more under the medical system and they're on the NDIS, then we can't, unfortunately, address those under the NDIS if it's not related to the goals.
So with that, now what from my very small pocket of the world that I've worked in with, I find that there's a lot of you don't know what you don't know. So going to a professional can help with that. But even then, like if they're coming, so if someone with a disability comes to you and they're like, okay, my plan says this, and you're like, hey, I can see that this, and this needs fixing, but we can only work in with theirs. Now, those other things, how am I trying to say? What am I trying to say here? Is there a way that, say, a parent or a person with a disability can come in and say, look, can we have an assessment here and see what other things are happening that maybe we could direct to make future life better, and can then that be taken back from a professional, from you guys, as some information to work on their goals at a later point? Does that question make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So so depending on what the plan is and how goals are written, sometimes there'll be scope, if someone's already on the NDIS, to then do a complete assessment and then go, this is something that's going to happen. It is related to the disability that they have.
Yeah.
And that's the disability that things have been accepted for. And then we can submit that, or sometimes you can have a plan review, or if people haven't liked what's in their plan, then if they argue for things within a given time frame, I can't remember what that is off the top of my head, but they can argue that certain things need to change.
Yeah.
Generally, the goals are written nicely and broadly, so that gives people more scope for changing things, so long as it's assisting in the right direction. But if people aren't on the NDIS, then by all means we can look at assessing things and making recommendations, whether it's an NDIS thing or even if it's not an NDIS thing. There's definitely other funding models for different things that are out there, and definitely third party is one that things have taken time to fix up in the past.
Okay.
Of physical conditions, or someone might be in an accident, for example, and they're years down the track, they've still got issues from that.
So if something's been covered by insurance, does that have an end date? Like 20 years later, you realize that this thing's happened and it's actually been triggered?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a big question, isn't it? Yeah.
Big question. Yes or no. So there's definitely some things that you can look at and go, that has been caused by, say, an accident. But if someone's accepted a payout, for example, then trying to get that reopened will be very close to very impossible.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it won't be, but it'd be very hard to get anyone to change anything in that respect. There are other things where people might be on a longer term insurance system, and we do have some who are covered for various different things. The way that those plans work is obviously a little bit different to the NDIS because it's not the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's a different funding model.
Company trying to make profit.
Hey?
It's a company trying to make a profit. They don't want to be paying you for the rest of your life.
It's an insurance company, yes. So yeah, insurance companies, they, as a general rule, have to report back to shareholders at some point usually. So as much as we don't like it, that is part of their business, and they've got to make sure that what they're getting money for is getting used for the right things, but also they need to actually make a profit because that's part of their business. And if they don't, they're broke and there's people without jobs, and that's probably a worse scenario.
Yeah. There's always a bigger picture than what we can see. As if anybody looks at Facebook and you see all the multiple different. Anyway, that's a tangent. All right, cool. So we briefly did a bit of this before, but what are some of the things that a physio can do or can help with that possibly our listeners may not realize or may not be aware of?
Well,
disability or not?
So let's start off in the young age group, so the pediatrics. If we start from someone who's just born, then physios will be looking at primary reflexes and working out whether they're integrating at the appropriate times, then getting people to, usually caregivers, to get them completing exercises or movements to try and assist that. Once that kind of thing's been looked at, we want to make sure that the child's meeting milestones. So if they're not meeting milestones for whatever reason, then looking at ways to get things moving so that they can meet milestones. Once people are meeting milestones, and there might be other things. So if you're missing a little bit of limb, so it might be a congenital thing where you're missing a bit of arm or a bit of leg, then they're, I guess, more your typical, you probably think of them as more your amputees, but sometimes it's congenital. Sometimes we need to work with those people to help basic activities during life. So whether it's doing things and coordinating with PE teachers or class teachers to make sure that the kids can throw and catch or participate in PE, or even just sit normally in a classroom environment. There's a lot of stuff where talking with other areas, for example schools, historically, we can make a big difference with that. If we go to more musculoskeletal stuff, any musculoskeletal tissue injury is going to be something that most private practices will be pretty strong on. There's different ways and means of addressing each of those injuries. So whether it's a articular, so joint-based problem, a tendon-based problem, muscle-based problem, a growth plate issue, some sort of sporting injury, head knocks, concussion treatments, and that leads into vestibular and headache and migraines. And then probably the area that I'm a little bit more specialized in is more in the hypermobility and dysautonomia, where we have various bits of the body that just aren't processing information and not keeping homeostasis, I guess, as well as we would like. That's a big area that is probably poorly treated from the medical system in general at the moment. There's some great doctors and therapists who are working on things in the POTS space at the moment, and so postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, so your heart's beating faster for a particular reason that we might not necessarily understand. So there's definitely a whole variety of areas where physio can play a part, where moving in certain directions or strengthening or conditioning things can be useful, and it just depends on what it is that we're trying to target, I guess. But a range of conditions from a reflex not integrating to losing reflex integration as people get older, or signals from brains not getting to various spots, or just something a little bit more simple like someone rolled an ankle. or my own shoulder, some arthritis and cysts where we've got to maintain the strength at a particular joint, making sure that we don't offload too much onto other joints and create problems in other areas.
Okay. So talking about shoulders, I came into you guys to fix my shoulder. Pain-free. I can push pain-free now. So happy. I should probably tell Jordan about that.
Should do.
I'll let him know the good news. Yeah. Not heavy yet, but I can push. But back to what you were saying there. So with the milestones, because that's, if you've never come across it, it's if you're seeing that your kid is unable to do A, B, and C because you've got milestones, there's specific things that they expect most kids to be able to do by this age, and this age. So is that, I don't have kids, so is that something like, are you going to a doctor or something and their doctor's going to tell you at a 6-month appointment or whatever, hey, this is where they should be, keep an eye out? Or
it's one of those things that if you're not necessarily paying attention to it as a parent, it might not get picked up. But as a general rule, there should be clinics where kids are checked, and the GP will usually, as a general rule, ask or check on different things. Pediatrics or pediatricians, I should say, will usually pick those things up when they have their routine reviews at certain points. Sometimes it gets missed though. Not being a pediatric therapist myself, I'm always one who's got to look at what they are on a piece of paper every single time I need to know it. But with the therapists that we have, they know just by asking certain questions about, are they walking yet, are they crawling yet, are they sitting, can they transition from sitting to crawling, what does it look like? Is the left leg symmetrical to the right leg? Are there things that are just not quite happening? Is the foot not kind of coming up into dorsiflexion when they're kind of transitioning? There's just a range of things that sometimes just looking and observing when you're treating someone or just assessing someone, sometimes those little cues, you might need to repeat it a few times just to see if it's just something that the child has just moved a particular way, or can they not actually do something? And then the next question is, why can't they do it? Why has something happened, or why is that not integrated? And that is a very good question, because there's so many answers to that.
And then that's when you go in and you do what you do.
Have to assess and work out where you want to try and intervene. So your intervention or your treatment, if you want.
So the early intervention, again, that preventative thing. So if something may not be going on the same path as what everybody else's expectations for an age group is, you're going to potentially, hopefully, have a better outcome later on in life if you can nip that in the bud earlier or redirect that course earlier.
Under the NDIS, that's some of those things are funded, but typically before the NDIS, that was an area that GPs would refer off to try and get some sort of early intervention. As the system before was called Better Start, and depending on how someone got on that, they'd be referred off to someone who was approved Better Start practitioner or a provider, and that would usually have a particular amount of money that they had to upskills is the wrong word, but had to try and get them up to meeting the milestones. And there's various different mechanisms or services that were appropriate for depending what was wrong. So that, in terms of early intervention, though, that's not necessarily just a pediatric thing. If you have someone who's got a condition or picked up a condition or later on in life, if you know that you can prevent things from deteriorating later on by having an early intervention, that's something that can still happen as an adult. It's not just a pediatric thing. It's more common in the pediatrics, but under the NDIS application thing, there is a thing that if we think early intervention is necessary, then we can tick that box, and hopefully they will consider it as something that needs acting on sooner rather than later.
I suppose it could make sense from their funding perspective too, if we can cauterize this now, bad word, if we can get in there and nip that in the bud now, that's 10 grand. Whereas if we let this go and the ball unravels and you've got more fixing, more specialists, more things, and that's 50 grand later on. I'm making up numbers.
Yeah. Well, whether it's numbers or whether it's quality of life, or I think the thing that people often lose perspective with is more the NDIS is trying to get people participating in community. And the big thing from if I was putting a government hat on, is can I get people in the workforce? And if I have people in the workforce, can I keep them in the workforce? Because essentially that's where taxes come from, and that's how they make money, and that's how people stay happy, because they're feeling fulfilled in life.
Yeah.
And so if you can keep people participating, whether it's work, social aspects, or anything like that, then you're pretty much achieving what you need them to do to achieve. But particularly from a government perspective, if you can have someone employed, that makes their life a lot easier from a collecting tax, but also not needing to maintain people. And then part of that early intervention is just maintaining people in employment, in relationships, in a social environment. That's essentially the underlying goal of the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes that makes sense. That's a good perspective. Two sentences at once. Why not? So you've been, how long have you been, you mentioned you grade 10, you realized what you didn't want to do and you knew straight away you wanted to get into physio. So I'm not calling you old, but you've been in this for a while, right?
Yeah, Jason, you and I both know that you and I are the same age. So I started uni in 1999, I think, and I think I started working in 2004. Could be a year either side for the starting. I can't quite remember. It's a long time ago. Yeah. But yeah, essentially, what's that? 20 years.
Yep.
Years being a physio, and coming up to 10 years owning our own practice. So that's quite a time, I guess you could think.
Okay. And over that time, you would have treated a fair few people.
Yes.
Can you talk about any successes, like any notable ones where you're just like, those good news stories?
I could, if I could think about any off the top of my head.
Yeah, just throw that one in the mix.
I can't think of any one specific, but you always have those ones where you you come home at the end of the day and you go, I really nailed that. Yeah. And sometimes it's just a simple thing, like I changed a basic exercise to something ever so slightly different from routine, and that has just all of a sudden made a particular muscle work better. And by getting that muscle to work better, then all of a sudden it's just going to delay something else. I'm trying to think of something more specific for you though.
I'm aware too that you're probably going to have confidentiality and stuff going on as well. So you're like, okay, that's a good one.
Going through my head at the same time, that's for sure. Thinking about, okay, can I mention that? Or no, that's too specific. That particular person might not want to be mentioned. So there's definitely things along those confidentiality rules and perspectives that we can't cross. But there's always ones where you kind of go, I just nailed it. And there's other ones where you come home, you think for hours upon hours until you actually come up with something that will actually work for someone.
Yeah,
that's going to be different. There's I guess the more I treat, everyone differently. I have a little bit of a thing where I just don't like guidelines so much. I realize that they're there for a reason, but I think everyone needs to be assessed and looked at individually. Yeah. And it might be the same exercise in name, but if I modify it just a little bit for everyone to make it a little bit more specific,
Yeah.
As your personal training background will tell you, there's a deadlift and there's a deadlift, and you can change that deadlift just so many different ways. And if you want to just change a very simple exercise like picking something up off the ground, then for one particular person, you'll do it one way. For a different person, you might kind of go slightly differently.
Yeah. It's working out what the correct means is to the end.
Yeah. And if you're, like Jordan, if you're a power lifter, you're going to need to find the most efficient biomechanical way of doing it.
Yep.
But, if you're someone who's not a power lifter, you just need to find the most efficient way for you to pick up something from the ground, whether it's a pair of undies or whether it's a box that you need to kind of take to work. It's going to be different for everyone, and finding out what people need, working out what their goals are. I guess that's probably one of the other things. As I get a little bit older, one of the first questions I ask these days is, what's your goal? Why are you seeing me?
Yeah.
And I think, for people who say, oh, it's because I've got medical diagnosis ABC, that's great. But then I have to start unpacking that and kind of go, okay, well, what does that actually mean for you? So you might have arthritis of your knee, but not everyone with arthritis in the knee needs to see me. So why is it that you need to see me? What is it that you want to achieve? And then you start getting people going, because I'm going on holiday and I need to be able to do A, B, C, and D. And then that gives you a whole lot more scope to work out where you need to get this person in 1 month, 2 months, 5 years, whenever it happens to be.
Yeah, because then you can work on the things, focus on the things that matter to them emotionally or as a person. And that probably actually helps them to do the homework too. I'm doing this so that you can frolic on your holiday. Well, that's what I'm here for. I want to frolic on my holiday. I'll do this homework now. Or I'm doing this because you have a big long word name that a doctor gave you. Yeah.
There's a completely different connotation and completely different mindset that goes into, if you're a client, what is actually being given to you. If I give you something to do because you've got a sore knee versus I give you something to do because you want to achieve something, that's a completely different means to an end. And I think as physios or as health professionals, working out what that goal or working out what drives a person, that's how we need to get people to do what they need to do to achieve their goals. It's nice and easy to just come up with a guideline and 50 different exercises to choose for a particular condition. But if we haven't actually got that personalized and don't actually know where the person needs to be in 1 month, 2 months, 5 years, then that's kind of not going to happen. You wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it unless there was actual reason for it. Everyone's busy. So, if you've got a reason for doing it, then you'll make time because you'll be able to see the point. If you don't need to do it because you can't see a point, you won't do it.
I found that's something I noticed as a PT too. The funny thing with their stuff that physios give you, so you dumb it down for us. Like you're like, okay, so all your body's doing all of these different things and you've got this injury. The quickest from 2 points, the straight line, is if you can get in there and strengthen this little muscle, and all you got to do is this. Just do that 10 times a day, every day for 3 weeks, and that muscle is going to get a little bit stronger. And people come away from physio and they're like, oh, it was crap. All they told me to do was this. Like, oh my God, did you do it? No. Is it better? No. Should you have done it? Oh. But because you unpack that, you unpack the puzzle, you look at the easiest thing. So I've had a lot of clients come in and they're like, oh, I stuffed my ankle up, I stuffed my knee up, whatever, years ago. I went to physio, it didn't get fixed, so I've just dealt with it. And it's like, oh, what did the physio do? Oh, they gave me a couple of little exercises. Did you do them? And every time they're like, no. And then you can see it on their face, it sort of dawns on them like, yeah, I sort of
should have done.
Should have, hey.
If Jordan's watching this, I'm going to pick you up on your exercise prescription there. 3 by 10. Not good.
Oh no, he made me do that. It is, but they were easy movements. So like for me, it was one of them. It was lying down, which is great because I enjoy that. And putting my hand backwards, but like so I was lying down on my belly and pushing down into a book. So it wasn't really much effort. Like there was effort, there was a bit of strain with doing the push to get the muscle activated. But I mean, you do it whenever you want during the day. Just so I would still forget. I'd come back to him and I'm like, hey, I got no appointment, so I barely did the exercises. I was like, come on, I should know better. But then I started finding tricks for myself. Like I would put a stack of books in my hallway that I had to walk over.
Yeah.
They were literally in my way. And I'm like, Jace, it takes 5 minutes. So I'd lay down on the ground, put my hands on the books and then do that. And I started getting better and stuff. And he gave me an exercise plan and stuff to do at the gym as well once we got to a certain point. But it was like the movement itself, what I actually had to physically do wasn't intricate or complicated or maybe even Instagram worthy. Like, that's what people want. They go, okay, I'm going to go see a physio. He's going to give me this really cool exercise where I stand on one leg and I rub my nose and I put my finger in a socket and that's going to be what it does. And they're like, what do you mean I just have to go like this? Like because we're all special little snowflakes, right? We need that weird, strange, unusual Instagram thing, but the basic stuff that we actually need to do to fix it. It's and it's me too. I know my clients have done it, but I'm as much to blame as them too. So I'm putting the finger at them and me.
Not all me. Yeah.
But that's something that I've found as people come away and that seems to be at least what I've found as a PT on the PT side, that people miss that, and that can potentially be 10, 20 years of pain that they've just learned to deal with, even though they were in a position earlier on to actually fix it and nip it in the bud. And if they do that, then they take their pain and they also make you guys look better. Because do what you say.
I guess there's two different things in there. There's the specific things to get specific things better, and then there's just overall strength, conditioning, flexibility. And to a certain extent, if you're injured, you might need the first, but if you're just living and you don't really have any kind of specific complaints, then you still need to do the second one. Yeah. And often I think people like doing more the second one, probably because if you're younger, then maybe the Instagram stuff. If you're a little bit older, then it's not so much Instagram, maybe it's Facebook, but it's those things that you like to do. They're the things that you probably want to be doing to maintain health and fitness as you get older. But doing some of those little movements, sometimes all it is just tweaking something a little bit. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you just have to do something heavier, lower reps, and just depends on exactly what needs to get done.
And that's probably the fun for you guys, is the puzzle, I imagine. Why
the puzzle's always probably the thing that's driven me, particularly with the more odd presentations that I get these days. It's more, okay, so why is that happening? When did it start? Okay, it's been going for a while. What kind of genetic things are going on? What are your parents like? How's it all been happening? Okay, what does food do to you? What does what does your job involve? Have you changed your job? Okay, so that job involves sitting more. That job involves looking up more. What's actually happening to the body? How's that affecting things? And once you start to put those puzzle pieces together, then all of a sudden you can come up with a vastly different person, even though they might be complaining of similar kind of problems.
Because everything's reps, isn't it? How we get out of the car every day 5 times is reps. Sitting on the couch is reps. I probably do more reps on the couch than I do in the car, but Oh, it depends on the week now. What are some nice upcoming projects or initiatives that you're excited about?
I think probably one of the interesting things at the moment is more the AI and how AI is going to change what we do.
Ooh, yep.
There's various different programs that are out there at the moment. I've got a couple open on my desktop trying to work out which ones we should try. And that's more AI in terms of note taking so that we can be probably more engaged with the clients in front of us. So hopefully what we'll see is, and there's definitely practices out there using them. Hopefully we'll be able to implement something so that we don't actually have to spend as long taking notes and doing letters and reports and all those things, which are almost to us seem like a long time to achieve, not a whole lot. Hopefully that kind of mundane typing job, whether it's just something that takes our notes and writes letters, or even if it just records as we're going, then that would be something that I think is, well, at least in other clinics, saving around about 3 to 5 hours a week worth of paperwork. And as someone who got a computer because it had a finger reader, then that efficiency is quite good to hear about.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. When you said I'm thinking what you've got like a little screen there and they walk in front of it and it gives you like gait analysis is all about it. But that actually makes it like more direct use, because that would save you a lot of time over, and so they could potentially, I get excited by AI. So they could potentially just have it on record and be typing it out, but the AI could probably come in and collate the data to what it already knows and it's learned about you, finding interesting points. You can look at it and go, okay, cool, that's exactly what I would have written, but also add this. You've only got to tap 30 keys then.
Yeah.
You've still got the info that you would have had, but you're not sitting there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, at the end of the session typing the whole lot. And if you're not a fast typer, or even if you've got a wrist injury yourself at the time, different things. That's really cool.
Yeah, historically there have been concerns around about privacy and the programs needing to send data off for voice to text to work efficiently, but the ways that I'm reading things at the moment, those problems have been overcome, so nothing needs to actually get sent to an external processor anymore. So particularly in Australia, under APRA guidelines, that Australian Health Practitioner Registration Authority guidelines, we have to be really careful of privacy and where data is stored. Obviously, in this day and age, you want to make sure data is secure and everything. So having secure data and secure data processes is vitally important for pretty much every health clinic who uses a computer, which is everyone these days, almost.
Yeah. So to me, it would make sense on that. Like, back in my day, we used to go and buy our computer games and take it home and not have the internet, and we would play that. So it's an enclosed system. So sure, I'd have like, hey, here's the information that this voice typer, whatever it's called, needs to work, and then you've got that. It's a closed system. It wouldn't need to. I don't get all of the back, but surely they could do it. And if they can't do it, they just ask AI how to do
it. That's probably requiring someone with a little bit more IT skills than me, but essentially, under APRA guidelines, things aren't allowed to go overseas. So we have to have sub-processors based in Australia, and they need to be making sure that they're not using any overseas storage facilities for data, I guess you could say. But it's just making sure that everything's appropriately secure, making sure that the Australian government and the Australian laws are applicable. As soon as you start storing something overseas, then it's just not necessarily under the same jurisdiction. So it's a little bit more complex. But I think getting that AI involvement is going to be the thing that is going to be more commonplace. And most therapists, from what I understand, when they're starting it, are going to be saying, okay, we've got AI recording. Do you mind? And I have heard no one on any of the things I've been reading so far. No one's actually really minded with that. I'm sure there probably has been, but no, from the reports that I've read, I haven't heard of anything yet. But it will be something that most, or at least physio practices, possibly exercise physiology, and GPs are probably all going to start to find that a more commonplace thing these days.
So how would that translate then for you working directly with your patient? Is that going to mean that the session will be shorter, or will the session be the same size but with same time, but just with a little bit more work? Like, I mean, I could see it could go either way. They're getting the same thing, but it's shorter. You can look after more people, or a little bit longer. They get more direct things in that session.
It could go either way, like you say. At the moment, what most, well, you would have seen when you're in the clinic, but what happens a lot of the time is we finish off the person, and depending on if we're on time or not on time, then we'll spend the next 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes doing the paperwork related to that. It's not necessarily something someone needs to sit in the room and watch us do, but there is usually a fair chunk of paperwork with, depending on whether it's a work cover or a team care arrangement, Medicare, NDIS, there's usually going to be a fair component of paperwork that has to get done. Yep. It should just mean that that stuff is done faster.
Yeah.
Whether or not patient gets more one-on-one time, the answer to that is probably won't happen, because often we don't need that. If it needed that, then the consult time probably should have been longer in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think one of the things that new graduate physios tend to do is they try and do too much in a given time frame.
Yeah.
By doing too much, it ends up being not specific. So as I've got older, and as I keep an eye on our newer grads, things tend to be more efficient when we're more targeted with what we're doing. So similar to your example with I just had to do this exercise. Now, that is a somewhat targeted, very targeted one exercise for one particular thing. If we are looking at more targeted, and that's probably what I said before, but if we're looking at adding in too much, then we don't know exactly what's made the change. And we need to be a little bit more specific and targeted so we can really identify that is what's made the change. That is where we need to get better. There are going to be times where there's lots of things that need lots of different input, but generally those are going to be more your complex presentations that they're going to need longer time anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas what we don't want to do is have something simple. We need 10 different exercises and needling and massage and taping and you name it. If you throw everything at it, then all of a sudden the consult time is really, really long, and some of those things will have a positive effect, some will have a negative effect.
But which one?
Yeah,
which
one?
Yeah.
I know. So that's where I guess your experience and your clinical reasoning as a physio drives you to be more specific rather than just throwing everything at it. If you don't know, maybe throw the kitchen sink at it, but it can be a little bit tricky if you just throw everything.
Yes, bit of Dr. House styles. Yeah. It's lupus. It's always lupus.
Let's start off with anyway. Yeah, so another thing that we've been looking at doing is working out if it's possible for us to come up with any intensive therapy programs, so particularly over the school holidays with the pediatrics. Sometimes families will go on holidays, and if we have people that are booked in somewhat regularly, then all of a sudden our staff may be less busy in those times, whereas other people might want more therapy in the holiday times. So we're currently looking at, is it feasible for us to do it? And obviously with staff members with their own kids and families, it gets a little bit tricky around school holidays, but it's something that we're definitely looking at. Intensive therapy together, because it's more cost efficient, more time efficient, or they might be less fatigued because they're not at school. So really trying to get them working on whatever it is that they need to work on during that time period at that school holiday might be great.
Yes, you'd also have mum and dad getting kids there, but also they're like, hey, I'm have to take time off to look after the kids, but now I have another 6 hours that I've got, just 8 hours, and I've got some injuries. Maybe it's time for me to come in and actually look after myself as well. Kids are at their school holiday group today or whatever.
Yeah, so it probably wouldn't be a school holiday group, but it'd probably be more, rather than seeing one person, say, once a month, depending on the frequency, every child's going to need a different thing, but they might not have something booked in frequently, but it might be if all of a sudden the therapist might go, you know what, we can achieve more if we condense everything up, and we just do, during school holidays, we might just do twice a week for 2 hours for the 2 weeks of school holidays, and then really work on that. And then during the school term, then maybe we don't need to see them as often. So it would depend on the kid and or the adult even, I guess. It would depend on exactly what they need and how the therapist is thinking that they'll achieve it. But it is definitely something that we're looking at, and I'm hoping that we can get something happening from a planning perspective soon.
Yeah, okay. And would that still be one-on-one sort of style stuff, or being a school holidays, would you be open to group style stuff with that?
We've had discussions with therapists about both.
Pearls of wisdom. So for anyone that's listening, what would Stu's pearls of wisdom be?
Oh, that's a interesting question. That wasn't on the cheat sheet, that one.
Yeah, no, I threw that one in.
Okay, pearls of wisdom. We're talking about therapists, we're talking about clients, or just
generally, like it can be to a potential client, to somebody that's got kids with a disability, to someone that's just got a disability from an accident or something, for other practitioners, and anything that you think, this is something I believe that someone needs to know.
From occupational perspective, first of all, try and find something that you are passionate about. Then it's not work. It's just something that you want to do. And that's not really a Stuart thing. I've heard that before. And I definitely know people who have had career changes because they got stuck going to work and they just hated it. So they decided to do something about it. And you've got other ones who just can't get out of it because they dug themselves in a hole financially, and they can't find an easy way out to get retrained.
Yeah.
From a disability perspective, I think it's really going to be a lot dependent on what kind of disability we're talking about. But given that I'm a physio and we deal a lot with physical disabilities, I think it's very important to look at trying to find a place in society, and so the person will feel valued and needed, and find an occupation. And I think what we would try and do as physios in general is get people so that physically they can participate, they can be involved. If we kind of don't talk about disability, that's essentially what we do with work cover people. We want them to get back to work. We want them to be back involved. It's not a huge leap to kind of go, well, someone's hurt their arm, they're unable to do whatever it is that they were doing as a chef, versus someone who's got a disability where their arm doesn't work quite as well. We need to work on trying to get that arm so it can move the joystick on the wheelchair, or use a light switch. It's just a different task that we're looking at.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I like to throw that one out. I'm here to learn off people. So pearls of wisdom. Sometimes I get, I managed to speak to, I don't know, it was a famous guy. I can't even think of his name now. And his pearl of wisdom for people was, you don't have to brush your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Yeah.
He was being funny. I know he's being funny, but geez, that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely does. That's why you call it Vicarious Insights, though, isn't it? So to get those insights and learn off people. So it's
exactly
the name of the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. And that wasn't someone I interviewed on the podcast. That was just I managed to speak to a random famous person. Was there anything that I have missed there, Stu, that you would like to?
If people are interested in coming and seeing us, we've got a discount for your viewers, if you like. Ethan and Dan at the Pimpama Clinic, we've got the discount price for private initial consults there. So that's the $100 discount for the moment. So the $100 fee, so discounting there. Otherwise, contacting us via the website www.ucphysio.physio, or you can call us on 55 618 111. Option 1 gets you to Upper Coomera, and option 2 to Pimpama.
So Ethan and Dan, for the listeners, what would their specialties be?
They're a jack of all trades, so they can do a little bit of everything. So they both have NDIS clients, they both have work cover, third party, and private practitioners, private patients as well. So they've got the ability to do a lot of different things.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Vicarious Insights. We hope that you found our conversation with Stu from UC Physio insightful and helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring stories and expert advice from the world of disability support and fitness. I will also provide some links in the podcast and on the website and on YouTube. If you have any questions, please comment or get a hold of us through those avenues. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out through the social media channels or as a comments. Until next time, stay connected and keep striving for your best self. Thank you. Thanks, Stu. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jace.